All right, folks, welcome to the wrap up for my cult week here on my Friday Popcast. Hope you guys are having a great week. Things are going well for you out there. I have a great guest with me. Baron is in the house. We're going to talk about cult movies and how they kind of transition away from being cult anymore at some point. Like, what point are they just like big deal, mainstream, top of best of all time kind of stuff? So, we're going to talk about all that. But I thought it was only important that we could just do one more ride on that AM Midnight Movie Express that really my childhood and kind of got me all into this. I say childhood, I was in college, but it's important. So let's do it right now.
All aboard!
See?
I told you it wasn't gonna be so bad.
Stop that dog!
Got a bad feeling about this.
Well, it's so great, man. It takes you back. Yeah, thanks for being here, brother. Did you have
Thank
an
you.
experience like that back in the day where a theater had like midnight screenings and special little videos and like it took me a while to find that one.
Yeah, generally they were downtown,
Hmm.
Minneapolis more than anything else. And of course, needless to say, the big one was Rocky Horror.
Yeah,
I mean, that
yeah,
one was
by
running
far.
for years. Yeah. But yeah, you'd have that. I didn't necessarily go to them because it was downtown Minneapolis and I didn't like going to the areas where they had these. They're the sketchy areas. And it's like,
As most
I,
downtowns are. We totally get it.
Yeah. I'm a suburban boy, so I'm one of the privileged, you might say. But yeah, we had those. You open up the paper. Remember that, kids? Open up the paper and look at the movies. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a magic thing, especially every Friday, because it had all the listings of everything with it was several pages, even page things of the movie, the posters of a movie in there. But then you saw those, the midnight showing. This is what we're showing. Uh, whether it's like La Cage aux Folles, because that was a big one they kept playing over and over
Hmm.
in our area. And needless to say, Rocky and various others on that. What am I say? Rocky is a horror film, but
Yeah,
Rocky
we get
Horror.
it. Now, I did
But
two
yeah.
videos. I talked about that. I talked about heavy metal and El Topo. Those were the big
Oh yeah.
three that they played pretty much every week at one of the theaters around me. And then, of course, there's obviously Pink Floyd The Wall was another huge
Yeah.
one that pretty much played perpetually around town somewhere.
Yeah.
Actually, Pink Floyd The
Yeah.
Wall, if you was familiar with the Tampa Bay area back then in the late 80s and early 90s, for some reason, the Hillsborough Theater, which most of these
Mhm.
theaters are all long gone. They're not very many of them that even still exist, but there was one on
Yeah.
Hillsborough, which was kind of a hassle. And like, as you say, not in the greatest area of town, but they
Mhm.
always had Pink Floyd The Wall, and I don't remember the one I worked at ever getting Pink Floyd The Wall. So I wonder if it was kind of a weird licensing thing where they, oh no,
Yeah.
we wanted in, the regional manager agreed that they would be the only one, or they just had good
Mhm.
receipts there. I don't know.
Yeah. You brought that up. I forgot about the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Always
Yeah.
seeing that in the paper. The wall, the
Oh,
wall. It's like,
yeah.
but I thought that was an album. I didn't know it was a
Oh,
movie, but why is it on the movie page for? But yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
shows you how I didn't know much
Um,
stuff back then.
But no, brother, I appreciate you being here and sharing. Let's just turn back that clock, and with us as well, someone else who can turn back that clock. My good friend, Captain Kirk, man, a newer YouTuber who just zoomed out to 1,000 subs, doing a lot of great theme park work, and just really a genuine dude who just shares stuff he likes with his family and stuff like that. So, but you have a wonderful brother. Be blessed, my friend. Great to can't. And we got to talk, catch up on the phone or something, man. Be good to chat with you. So,
Congratulations, Captain.
yeah. Let me just share the pitch that I threw Baron. I said, Baron, I was really thinking about some of the movies that I hadn't spent a lot of time on, or what the cult arena of things, and it took me to the Blade Runner concept that Blade Runner and The Thing came out in 1982, box office flops in the shadow of Wrath of Khan and one of the Rocky movies and all that kind of stuff. So these movies completely bombed financially. But by the time I was in college, for sure, definitely by like the late 80s and early 90s, they were both considered like top of the class. And I know Blade Runner did get some nominations for like a Saturn Award and things like that, but these were both considered cult movies. And the question I posed to Baron, and we kind of put together a list of a few others to talk about, was at what point is a cult movie no longer a cult movie? It becomes like, yeah, it bombed, it did its thing, but reality is fandom gets so big. It cult for a while, sure. But at some point it's like, because I don't think anybody 30 and under would think Blade Runner is a cult movie. Do you?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think so. I think most people would be like, they would consider it one of the greatest sci-fi movies, or it's on those lists, or they haven't seen it yet, or something like that. But it's weird that that's an evolution that you and I live through that may never exist again. Cult movies are just never going to be defined the same way now, I don't think.
No, I in fact, I was even going to broach that topic, so it's nice to know that we're on the same wavelength. That we didn't have a generation that re-experienced, you might say, because of the advent of cable and VHS, where they failed in the theaters. But you go through a video store and you see that tape on there. It's like, oh, that looks interesting. You take it home, and before you know it, a lot of people are doing that. Or you watch on cable. Maybe it's going to be Showtime a later evening. It's just before Skinamax goes interesting on the weekend. So yeah, the discovery, we don't have that anymore. Where you have that discovery. Well, I think in a sense we do, because we are having films that didn't do well in the theater, but hopefully with the streaming service might give it a boost in the arm. May I be so bold to explain what I think might be another cult film? Transformers 1 failed in the theater.
That's true. It did, didn't it? I didn't do a video on how bad it did because I was so shockingly surprised at how good it was. I had a couple, actually my nitpicking, which wouldn't make most Transformers fans happy with me, was the fact that there was some cursing and stuff. And I'm like, no, we have to keep it for the littles because the littles is the next generation. I get it. I can handle a couple curse words, but I don't want like my 6-year-olds and running around going badassatron. I just don't want that happening. That's a good choice. But I will say streaming and stuff has made it that the cult word of mouth still exists. For instance, I came out of, I don't know about you, but I came out of 2024 very cynical and pessimistic. I thought 2024 was a disaster in films. I mean, I said right when it came out, I said, whenever Deadpool be on your best of list, because it's one of the most fun movies that we've had of the year, it's a pretty weak movie if you start analyzing the ending of the movie and how it's ripped off other things. It's all about your penis and fart jokes. It's just, this is all this gay jokes. It's like that's it. There's no substance there. It's not top 10 Marvel or anything.
No.
That shows how of a year it is. And the Oscars, of course, had dropped here recently, and it's an abomination what's on the list. Because other than Dune 2, and I mean the Wicked people are wicked. That's fine. Like we had Barbie last year. But I'm like, I say all that to set up the fact that I was listening to Nadia and Vex. They're horror people for sure. They listed off. I mean, I hadn't seen Nosferatu yet. I was aware of that, but they listed to 2 or other things, and I hadn't seen. And I've been watching some of these things, and they're like gold. They're like 8, 9s on my scale, which is unheard of. I don't give 8s and 9s. I'm like, wow, this is a great movie. So It's so different though, Baron, and maybe we're just too old to figure out how to get our arms around that word of mouth
Right.
part. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I'm hoping because of course, with Pop Talk, we all sit back and tell people watch Transformers 1. Uh, Mike was a little on Nosferatu. He thought it was good, except he thought it dragged unnecessarily in parts. I believe Cash liked it. I want to see it. I really
Mhm.
want to see it.
Mm.
But it's odd. It's the films that, like you're saying, are the 8 and 9s. Nobody really knows about because they don't get the press. They want to dump
Mhm.
all the money into the stuff that we already know about. Do we really need all that money going into advertising the latest Marvel film or whatnot? We know, okay. You can just have the bare minimum. We know, but these other films suffer so much because, well, one, like Transformer 1, horrible first trailer that killed it for a lot of people. Um, and other films like Nosferatu and all that, you hardly see any adverts for it. And Hollywood is putting the wrong way. And this might actually be where we do get that new wave of cult film because it's going to be word of mouth from us YouTubers. Just like in the old
True.
days where you opened up Starlog or you
Right.
got together with your geek groups and talked, or the water cooler and say, man, you got to see this film. Uh, I mean, that's how Star Wars took off. It was only beat once with Smokey and the Bandit, but then it just boom. You had
Right.
Starlog. You had people saying, "Oh my God, I went to this convention. I saw this movie. When it comes out, you got to see it."
I think that
Uh,
the so let's see if we can kind of put a bow on this one too, because I think we're dancing
yeah,
around the
yeah, we are.
financial part, because the
Hmm.
financial part is so important because of streaming the way they've handled it, they've ruined money getting back to those creators, residual money and
Hmm.
things of that nature. So
Yeah.
let's take a Nosferatu. Let's just say Nosferatu is that we're still talking about 10 years from now. Let's say Transformers 1
Hmm.
is just got a massive following. How does the money's not flowing there, right? So
Hmm.
I'm sure Harrison Ford is probably sick of having to talk about Deckard. I'm sure
Hmm.
at some point Kurt Russell is. I shouldn't say that. I've seen interviews with Kurt Russell. He's still just as amused today as he was at ever. The
Yeah.
people are still talking about the thing and the hat they chose for him and the stories on set and
Hmm.
was he really a thing or not. He actually, I think Harrison Ford's been beat to death with that. He doesn't care. He's kind of a bit of a
Yeah.
crotchety old guy, but you
What
feel like
when
the
he's that
world is
stoned.
so. I don't know. The world is so different now that it won't. I don't want to say benefit them, but it doesn't flow financially in the same kind of benefit with the way the streaming works. That
Hmm.
another one that was brought up recently, I think Vex did a video as well. I did a video on this a year or two ago. I heard about it word of mouth, I think from Mad Barber through Sporking News' group, and it's
Hmm.
Taylor Sheridan's Wind River. It's a Jeremy Renner murder mystery, dead body story,
Hmm.
and it's phenomenal. But even if it becomes a bigger and bigger deal, does that get more money to Taylor Sheridan, Jeremy Renner? Does it? I don't know, and I think that's the
Yeah.
disconnect that we're in now compared to what movies we're talking about. Whereas, look, man, if people turned out to watch Rocky Horror in the theater would just keep doing it. They just keep
Hmm.
doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. If heavy metal people were showing up, they would find a way to get heavy metal posters, heavy metal magazines, heavy metal T-shirts in front of people. It
Hmm.
was like ways to make money on it. And I feel like that's the part that's not feeding the machine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, what an awesome film Heavy Metal is. A 100% across board. Lousy sequel, but great movie that one was. And it wasn't technically completed. It
Right.
is still a
They
masterpiece.
just threw it together, and there are sort of like a big continuity error in one piece because they cut
Hmm.
a whole section out, and it's like we jump forward, and we're like, how the ball? If you analyze it, your brain's gonna like break because it doesn't make sense. They
Hmm.
cut a whole segment out of the movie. But remember that though, it would be like go to a theater and like they knew that heavy metal would be screenings, so the comic shops would have all these heavy metal magazines front and center. No offense, Batman,
Hmm.
Superman, but for today or this
Yeah.
weekend, all the college students would have access to all these heavy metal magazines they would make money. We would get into
Yeah.
heavy metal. We go see the movie. We go buy the
Hmm.
soundtracks, and So I
Oh,
feel like
awesome soundtrack.
that's what's lost, right? Because there's no
Hmm.
Nosferatu boom happening in merch as far
Hmm.
as I have seen. Maybe I'm wrong,
Hmm.
but I think when we look at that, it seems like it took a lot longer for the thing to be mainstream than Blade Runner,
Mhm.
because now the thing I
Yeah.
think pretty much gets its due. But that's the love of practical effects. It
Mhm.
it it
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
have sort of the way the money flows back the way I'm talking about, but I feel like at least it's getting its time honored stamp
Mhm.
and things like that. I don't know. How long was it for you where you started to have a greater appreciation of those two movies in particular, the two that I had mentioned?
Uh, you know, the thing scared the absolute bejesus out of me. So I guess I appreciated when I first saw it, which was on
Right.
cable actually.
Yeah.
But it's John Carpenter, and you're kind of used to that. I mean, his films kind of are that it builds up a cult following, whether it's that or Big Trouble in Little China. I don't think that did
Mm.
so well, but I mean, how many people are going out there talking about the Pork Chop Express? So I think amongst like people like us that watched it, that were young, we thought it was cool, man. This is John Carpenter. This is the guy who did what Halloween film.
Hmm.
He did Escape from New York and how awesome that was, and his music. So I think those of us that were young got into it. We got it. It was the important ones that did it, which were the older folks who are coming in. They're almost like films ahead of their time, especially Blade Runner. I mean, this is
True.
cyberpunk
That is very
before.
true.
Yeah, that was cyberpunk before it was even called cyberpunk. It was such a different vision of the future, and look how many people try to replicate that across the board. But really, honestly, that's the king of it all. And I think the thing for me is I'm one of the rare ones. I like the theatrical version better because I like the him talking the over or the narration because it gave it a sense of that old film noir detective story
Mm.
where you hear Philip Marlowe or whoever it is talking, right?
Hmm.
And that helped grab me in there. And being able to say that when Harrison Ford did that, he was so unimpressed. He just kind of delivered the lines, and that worked perfectly because it felt like someone was worn down. And these are things I was analyzing when I first saw it. Now I liked it when I saw it, but it grew on me to be where I started looking at it as a cinematic masterpiece. And
Mm.
I think that really came forward when you had the 10th anniversary, the first director's cut,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
is when I saw it actually in the theater. So that I think that is kind of the big mark right there, saying, "Hey, this film is more than just a cult film." And it took about 10 years, but we
Yeah.
got it. You and me and a bunch of others, we got it.
Yeah. Sci-fi was so changed radically in how we thought about things, and then once you got to the
Mhm,
'90s, we started getting other things that were
mhm.
also very visionary and different. I don't know that The Crow counts in this same arena, but it felt like the
Yeah.
superhero genre was being like something different. And we got Dark City, of course, and it was like, oh, okay, we're seeing
Mhm,
different things before we get to the Matrix, which of course is the next big real shift.
yeah.
Shift. I mean, there was a few steps along the way. I didn't want to discount T2 or even the Abyss.
Mhm.
I mean, what James Cameron did in the Abyss
Oh yeah.
technologically was a huge deal. Um,
Mhm,
just fascinating. It is fascinating to see how a fandom can wrap its arms around something and elevate it and get other people aware of it. I think a little bit of
mhm,
that happens in streaming, but the attention span is so short. Like
mhm,
Loki and I were talking about the things that don't stick. Like how many things are generated but nothing ever sticks. We were talking about, I
mhm,
believe it was 2023, where even 2022 2023, that's sort of window where like people were still talking about Maverick long after the run,
mhm,
right? People were talking about Stranger Things 4 long after the initial binge watching was done. Like there's very few
mhm,
things sort of have legs. I think that
mhm,
Hollywood is very disconnected from what works in getting us to talk
mhm,
about things. Like you and your conversation about how they over advertise Marvel couldn't be more true because they're just going to waste a whole bunch of money. I mean, I'll be honest.
mhm.
They only needed to do like one or two trailers. That's pretty much it. I think they should do a
Yeah.
stinger trailer, a little 30-second TV type trailer, and they should do
Mhm,
a 2-minuter that
mhm,
doesn't spoil all the gags.
mm,
And that's it. People are going to see it. They're not going to see it. You show a couple cool fight scenes that'll go on Twitter, and that's pretty much it. They should cut back on press tours. They're damaging
mhm,
their brands. and you just don't know. I think you're almost better served trying to figure out if it's going to be embraced, then figure out how to put money behind it and keep it going. But
Right.
these other cult buckets, like Squid Game would be another example for me, where I feel like enough people were like, "Oh, you should watch this," or you know what I mean. I feel like it had legs and kept it going. Yeah, it's such a fun topic to kind of discuss how the concept of cult has changed so much, and
Yeah.
our experience enjoying it has changed so much. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you think about the impact that Kiddo had. I mean, I don't really know. Anime films typically don't do well in the theater, but boy, did that have an impact and kick the doors open, not just for people marveling over the film, but anime, and started getting people
Definitely.
more interested in that. So that was one of those that hit a cult genre more than just the movie,
Sure.
which is in by itself impressive. Um, when I really don't know where I was going to go with this, but
Well, you're fine. We'll transition on to another one. I think
yeah,
was
yeah,
the other one I kind of threw your way, and we were talking about before we
save me.
started. wa- was how I took a lot of heat because I had included Nightmare
Mhm,
Before Christmas on a cult list one time, like the underrated cult movies. This was written
mhm,
in the early 2000s. And at the time, folks, there's no Hot Topic yet. There's no, I mean, there's
mhm,
a Spencer's, but they didn't cater
yeah,
to things the same way we did. They actually were more alternative and stuff like that. So Nightmare Before Christmas at this point was still not a thing. Like there was no, like I remember catching the bug because they came out with these miniature Christmas ornaments. They aren't even real Christmas ornaments.
oh,
So these little tiny things. They don't even really hang on your tree because they were too heavy. If you ever had,
mhm,
even if it's a fake tree, it'll pull the limbs. It's like they weren't even applicable to use on a tree. But these things, we got every single one of them. And I gotta be honest, even when we doled out the Christmas ornaments the kids wanted, there was a little bit of a feud going on which kid was going to get these things because they were selling out like crazy. And then I realized we were quickly realizing how many people also were buying out. So if you'd go into the Disney store at the time, they have all these themed T-shirts, and if they had Jack and Sally, guess what? Those would sell out like rapidly. And I was like,
mhm,
oh, something has changed here. Even though it's made a little bit of money and it's treated as a success in some ways, it is
mhm,
a phenomenon that really isn't going anywhere yet.
yeah.
Now that seems silly because Nightmare Before Christmas, the debate now is, do you start watching it at Halloween or at Christmas? Is it both? It's like it's just such a massive thing. But back then, that was not the norm, right, Baron? You can at
Right.
least prove to these people that I'm not completely crazy. There was a lag time here.
There was, yeah. I think it took a little bit. I think I don't know. Maybe this is my take. I think people thought it was a little too goth slash
Hmm.
emo.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
And
that's
then
fair.
if you take, but it's Tim Burton. That's what you get
Hmm.
from him. You get that surrealistic, uh, darker tone of stuff, even if it's lighthearted. And of course, Danny Elfman doing the music. Um, you It did have that. I mean, basically, I think the niche with that was with the animated people.
Hmm.
Because it was, of
Hmm.
course, a stop motion and all that. They were the ones also that was appreciating it, and I think the mass people didn't quite understand what this was about. And it took a little bit, and of course, then you start the fight. Is it Halloween? Is it Christmas? How about this? Watch it at both seasons, okay?
I agree.
It's the
Lady Mist.
oh, how you doing, sweetheart?
And
Oh,
Lady Miss, I hope that you've been able to find the Magnificent Seven. We saw your comments, and then the stream would never start. And then by the time Magnificent Seven actually started, it was a magical technical thing. But we've seen you. We know you're out there. Thank you for being here, and thanks for hanging with us. Jill also is here. It's great to see her. Hope she's doing well. Jill is
hey, Jill.
she did a little bonus stream with me. If you haven't seen it,
Oh,
Baron, um,
oh.
she's a diehard, a little bit of a hardcore Rocky Horror. Not only
Mhm,
a performer, a collector, has a ton of memorabilia. A
mhm,
bit of a Trekkie too. She'd be up your alley there in the
mhm.
old Trek conversations. That's beyond
Oh,
my
yeah.
scope of expertise, but hey, yeah,
Oh,
love it.
actually, we have talked with her. She's a lovely lady, and
Beautiful
she
lady.
comes.
Yes, very sweet.
Yeah, so I have enjoyed her company, and I hope to enjoy her company even more in the future. And we're trying to
Yeah.
we're trying to get Lady Mist a new computer and all that, and so we can get her on because she has such great takes when she's in the chat. So it's always great to see both of them.
Absolutely.
We love
Absolutely.
our we love our
Yeah, I think you're really spot on about Nightmare Before Christmas. I've always had a little bit of that. We there was no emo or goth when I was in school. It was just
Mhm.
the alternative kids. We
Yeah.
listened to The Cure. Also, it was weird because I listened to everything. Baron, back
Mhm.
then you could have a cassette tape for everything, and it didn't matter. No one really
Mhm.
judged you the way we're judged now. I could have an
Yeah.
Iron Maiden cassette next to a Men in Black, a Men at Work cassette. Versus, it was
Mhm.
just you just could have whatever. Um,
Right.
so the Nightmare Before Christmas, I had a bend towards that earlier on, I think, than most people. So
Mhm.
it was one of those that is now it kind of seems silly to think that it wasn't that big,
Mhm.
but it really wasn't. There was no merch for a long, long time. There was
No.
nothing like that for sure.
Uh,
So,
yeah, we had one of those uh arts gallery where where you go in and buy. Um,
yep.
I suppose art gallery is a good way to say it, and it was all dedicated to animated cells. So you go in there and
Okay.
see
Yeah.
from everything. They even had stuff from the old BC telephone commercials that they had, I believe, in New York,
Wow. Cool.
where they have Grog and a few of the others. Like, oh my god, I want that! He's screaming into the tree. But they also had it was around. I think this is around when Beauty and the Beast. I can't remember when it came out, but they had like the heads different in the display, the different heads of Jack Skellington with
Oh
the
yeah, yeah,
different
yeah. The
emotions.
models, the
Yeah,
sculpts. Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
But these were just the heads, and it's like then they had the little display. It's like, well, they definitely know who to target for, and
hmm
I never thought about getting it. A lot of stuff was out of my price range, but it was like, oh, this is impressive. This is
hmm
impressive. So,
The making of featurettes that were on like the DVD release.
oh yeah.
If I wasn't a fan or an Uber fan, that's what they did for me when I was going because during that time frame, well, they did a lot of other work like that. Like my kids fell in love with James and the Giant Peach, which is another one of those sort of like stop motion things with these great
Mhm.
messaging. It's super sweet and whatever. So I was down the rabbit hole of like that because we grew up when stop motion was like commonplace and an
Oh yeah.
art form that we respected from Harryhausen and Rankin Bass all the way through to what Star Wars did. So we love
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So for us, it was a big deal. And Dean Krantz
Oh,
popped in. Great to see him, man. He's so awesome. He's always a big supporter, big fan of stuff. So
well, yeah. I
and
mean, how many of us just rotted our brain on Clash of the Titans? And I suppose you can almost, in some ways, put that in the same category of a cult film that has more legs now. I mean, now you had the
mhm.
reboots or whatever, the two films, which I've never seen because I'm sorry, I'm going to stick with Ray Harryhausen's vision and
You know what?
Hamill.
That's a really good analysis too. And we definitely need to do a talk hard on. I'm writing down we need to do a talk hard on Clash of the Titans.
Mm,
It's come up a couple times, and we just never makes the cut, never makes the final vote, always gets bumped. But that's a good one to kind of break back and always fun. Yeah,
oh
I
yeah.
couldn't agree more. Good one. Stephen Ransom is also here, another contemporary of ours that could
Hey,
chime in
Stephen.
about these type of topics. And there he is, Mr. Pacific 414, Mike himself. Hey, brother. Hope you're doing well. It's great.
Morning, Mike. I'm behaving.
That's all right. We don't care too much. There are some cult movies that it's funny because I don't know they had much of a lag time. They were just more
Mhm,
cult because they were sort of like off the nature. And I talked about this last week when I talked about how the boom of the '90s. The boom of the '90s wasn't
mhm,
that these things were not successful. Somebody was trying to like they
mhm.
were. I don't know. I felt like they were trying to pick a fight over like Pulp Fiction because it won Oscars or whatever. Like, well, no, we have a grindhouse movie like that being mainstream
Mhm.
is what the point is, right? So
Right.
another good example would be Fight Club, right? Fight
Yeah.
Club is not a cult movie because people didn't recognize it was a good movie. It's the fact that it has now become a phenomenon of love for a film like that. Where at the time it was like,
Yeah.
that's a weird movie. Who saw that? Like, what's that about? You know what I mean? So it's more memed than it is anything else, for sure. So,
Yeah. Definitely.
uh, yeah. See here, Steven says DVD content was another thing lost to YouTube and streaming. Yeah, you know what? It really is. However, I will say, Steven, it does. It may not make you happy, but there's a lot more we can find now, right? There's
Mhm,
a lot more we can find now, Baron. I mean, I can tell you that uh, you can. I went down the Tarantino rabbit hole over something else, and it was like
mhm.
I was down the rabbit hole of him with all of these quotes and interviews and things he's done over the course of now, 15 years of YouTube content. I'm like, there's so much more than a DVD only content, but I do miss some of the DVD content for sure.
Oh yeah, I love those DVD in the commentaries. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you watch it through, and then you watch it through again, and you want to hear what they're saying about the movie, and you
Yeah.
get so much insight on that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, when you start having a movie that you're making quotes from, it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of started slipping from that cult level.
Right.
Uh, Even if people have not even seen the film, you say the line, they know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we use that. We talk about that a lot because sometimes we'll be doing a movie or we'll talk about a movie that some folks on the panel may not have ever seen before, but they'll know references. So we're getting ready to do a talk hard on Back to the Future. Talk about hitting you in the feels, Baron. It's the 40th anniversary this year, Back to the Future. Does that just cut you deep? Because it cut me deep to think about 40 years. Like, wow, that's, yeah,
Okay, I'm going to give another cut to you. 35 years of Back to the Future 3.
I know. Yeah, I know.
I know Mike was more than happy to spring that on us
Mm-hmm.
over
Yeah.
there. It's like, it's the 40th anniversary. Thank you, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I got enough gray here. You don't need to
Great.
advertise it more.
It's gone, bro. At least you have some color left. I got nothing. I'm white.
Oh, yeah.
People think I'm way older than I actually am. It's so crazy. So, lots of love for Clash of Titans out there. That's great.
Yeah.
Jill's saying reminds her of the old Seven Voyagers of Sinbad. Indeed, Jason of the Argonauts. Yes, Harryhausen, man, Harryhausen gold for sure.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's just it. We grew up on films that were 20 years old at that time. They're old films, and those Harryhausen films. So that's something. As I like to sit back and say, the 5-10 year bubble that we have with a lot of people today. They don't want to see anything older for whatever reason. And we did. I mean, when they sit back and say, "I don't want to watch something that's black and white," then you're going to miss Clerks. You're going to miss. Let's see what else. What is it? Do the Right Thing? I believe was black and white as well. All these other films that were made. Young Frankenstein. I mean, then you're going to miss that with that attitude of I don't want to see things black and white. And I'm not even going back to the classics like Citizen Kane and The Day the Earth Stood Still and various stuff like that. I think we were a little bit more open minded because we did grow up with black and white TV. So even the show was in color, you saw it in black and white. I mean,
it was.
Yeah.
I think people lost sight of that too, right? Because of technology. It's like some of us had a black and white TV. It didn't matter if you were. So my grandfather he was kind of my gateway to like Westerns and some of that stuff. And he had this small portable TV that would be out in the shop where he would work. And that's where I'd catch myself seeing and learning about John Wayne, John Ford movies. I would, these are the war movies of those eras, whatever. And they were on a little black and white TV. It didn't matter if they were in color or not. The first time I saw them were in black and white because they were on that little tiny TV. And it is a tragedy. And all we can do here is do our best to promote and discuss some good content in the scale opposite, the criticisms, and try to talk about, the glory days of Hollywood have a lot of great stuff to offer, and don't dismiss it just because it's not been put in color for sure.
I mean, you're familiar with Phil McCracken, I suppose.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
I have a meme about Phil. My first.
Good.
I have to find it. I have to find my Phil meme while we're discussing things. So.
Oh yeah, I think everybody knows Phil, the best troll on YouTube, even though I'm better than him. But he constantly argues that many of these films, like he keeps on saying, like Tron and all that, they weren't good films. They didn't do good in the theater. It's like, don't you know the concept of cult? Where it's discovered, it was probably ahead of its time, like Tron was, and it found that new jolt of life. If it didn't, if it wasn't that good, then why are people loving it today? And why did you have a sequel, an animated series? Now you're gonna have another sequel. You know, and I think what helped for us is you had the video games. Obviously, you go into the arcade and there's the Tron machine, so you're living Tron as you're playing Tron. But but because it had a bad return in the theater, doesn't mean it's a bad film.
Well, we just talked about it, right? So Blade Runner and Thing are widely considered classics. I mean, I consider Thing among my top. Well, I made this argument. I don't know about best, But I've said I watch every year. The three I
Hmm.
watch every single year is Halloween, The Thing, and American
Hmm.
Werewolf in London. I don't
Oh.
really want to rank them against each other, and I'm also not trying to dismiss other slide. I'm not. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
these three have a cherished element in my love of the horror genre. Blade
Hmm.
Runner, I think, if it had just come out in October instead of
Hmm.
June, it probably would have done significantly better in the box office. I'd have to look at the film release schedules to tell you, but
Yeah.
when you're coming out in the middle of the ET phenomenon in 1982, Wrath
Right.
of Khan, one of the Rocky movies, I mean, there's so many movies, and
Oh
you
my
drop the
word.
same day, not around the same time. It was the same weekend as The Thing, and there's another movie or two that also opened. Of course,
Hmm.
it's the box office. It's a disaster. We were just
Right.
discussing. There's a Thanksgiving movie that comes around. It's called Dutch with Ed
Oh
O'Neill.
yeah. Oh
It
yeah.
was
Yeah.
they opened it in the summer because they
Hmm.
said, well, no one goes to the movies in the winter. You only get like a one. You only get a couple weeks in the winter for the box office. We want to open in the summer. So they just ruined the nostalgia element of the movie by opening it
Right.
in the summer, and it bombed financially. Even though everyone will search out Thanksgiving movies to watch, and Dutch has kind of lived on. Maybe not as big as most Christmas movies, but it's lived on pretty well. And yeah, the marketing stuff matters so much. I mean, you talked
Hmm.
about that earlier with the Transformers 1 trailer. What a disaster that first one was. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I
Mike had a
mean.
great comment too. I want to just make sure we highlight him. Going to have a double
Oh yeah.
feature party with Back to the Future 1 and 3. Why is 2 not in the list in the conversation, Mike? I'm just confused. Why are we skipping the middle chapter?
Anniversaries, because it's the anniversaries. It's the landmark anniversaries. The zeros and the fives.
I understand. Baron, I'm sure we're old enough to remember we saw those in the theater. So
Yeah.
I sat in Back to the Future 2 and it ended and
Hmm.
they show you a little teaser, a little stinger with the Western. And I was
Yeah.
actually ticked off. I felt like I was getting cheated. And so before we'd had the era of a setup for another movie, I was mad. I felt cheated. That wasn't how our movie experiences were supposed to go. You weren't allowed to do half a movie. You weren't allowed to do that back then. It just was not. So for me, I have a little bit of a bitterness about Back to the Future 2 that I can't let them off the hook of. Right. So,
Well, it's the same with Empire Strikes Back. They left you hanging. It's like,
but it was still a complete story.
oh,
Like I
that's
can
true. It
just,
was
it's
complete.
different. So like
Yeah.
Back to the Future 2 isn't really a complete story. It's just like it stops and you're like, well, if you
Hmm.
want to come back and see how the rest of the story goes, because now he's trapped here and this is what happened. So you're just, yeah. Anyway, that's the difference between
Yeah.
these two. Right.
Well, yeah, and now we got it. Now we have Dune. It was two-parter. We have
Oh, I
Lord
hated
of the
Dune 1 for that
Rings.
reason. I hated Dune 1 for that reason. Now, I'm not a Dune guy. I'm the last person to be throwing rocks at the Dune franchise.
Oh.
But the one thing I cannot get through, even with my rewatch, when Zendaya shows off, that movie slows down so much for me that I'm bored
Hmm.
out of my mind. However, the abrupt ending of it was like, okay, I don't understand why we did that. I don't know.
I
Sin
think
City.
Zendaya has that thing in films. When she's on, it's like,
Oh, she's just god awful for me.
oh yeah,
So
she is.
another, I didn't even. This is complete blind for Baron. I would say this would count as a cult movie that now has become more than that, but definitely because of the manosphere and podcasting fear, and that would be 300.
Oh
And
yeah,
I think it made a lot of money. I don't think it's a bad movie or it didn't make money, but I think its legacy is now greater than the film itself. It's
yes.
memes and quotes and clips and energy, right? I mean, all of that has transcended its movie.
And you know what? A 300 is exactly what I talk about when you're having uh, mythology, folklore, whatever of our ages. And it just grows and it grows and it
Mm,
grows and it grows from the original source. And you have these deviations like that, as you're saying. 300, which of course is based off of Thermopylae. Uh, I believe I think it's
that's the
Thermopylae.
correct one. Yep, yep.
Yeah, and
Frank Miller's graphic novel based on Thermopylae.
yeah,
Yes.
and the film is over the top, which is great because that's how a lot of those mythological stories were. I mean,
Hmm.
when you hear about the heroes and such, it's like these giant men coming in and you're taking them out and stuff like that, and that expanded, almost showing you exactly how these old stories grew back in the old days. This is doing it for us here, and
Hmm.
uh, it's just a fascinating to see that social evolution in that sense.
We probably need
Uh,
to do more highlighting of that as well, like the
mhm.
like you said, that social dynamic of its legacy growing right before our eyes. We don't spend enough time acknowledging, because I highlighted this a little bit when I talked about the it wasn't a meme. I know what the terminology is, where it went viral about, what are men are thinking of Rome every day, like how many times a day I did a thing with Vex about that. It was like, yeah, because something about Rome comes up in our lives nearly every day, and men obsess with it because that's how we're
Yeah.
wired. So,
Oh,
uh,
yeah, I mean, when you have like Marcus Aurelius, yeah,
hmm
and all the
hmm
other stuff like that. You have the 12 Caesars. You have I Claudius. I
yeah,
mean, it's just amazing that how much that has affected us. And I'm more of a Nordic guy myself, so I just kind of
sure. No, I
I
think that's
go,
fair. That's fair.
yeah, I think of Harold Hardrada, you know.
But yes, yeah, Steven, Sin City is in black and white with
Yeah.
all of the colorizations and stuff that led me to 300, because I enjoy
Mhm.
rewatching 300 more than I enjoy rewatching Sin City. Both are phenomenal adaptations of a graphic novel. Everything
Mhm.
else you have to take however you want to judge them. Jill's sending me back over to her community tab. New picks for Back to the Future DeLorean in '85, the Universal tour. Oh,
Ooh.
that's super cool. Yeah, I don't know where I have my pictures with the car. I don't know. There's a video. I don't know. Did I make it members only? Anyway, so the Pops channel had no content for years. I'm talking like
Mhm.
7 or 8. I mean, forever. I didn't have any content here. I created it on a whim based on my namesake, and then my wife and I were called on a Friday afternoon. We were doing something else, and they wanted to know if we do a media thing, and they were doing the movie Cars,
Ooh.
and I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. But I don't have my camera. I have nothing, so I have my phone.
Mhm.
So the sound is awful. They were super polite, and that's how I got my video of me driving the Ecto One, where they had like a green screen. I'm the only adult that did this, by the way. All the people that I saw doing this,
What?
I'm the only adult that stood in line to get their video done in the Ecto One, and I was so ticked. It's me and in all these different vehicles. So there is with a DeLorean. So I've been in all these vehicles now. I feel like the bucket list is complete because it is a dream for us nerds that grew up with it, 100%.
Oh, I would have been behind the wheel Ecto one
Yeah,
in a heartbeat. It's like I would have
100%.
pushed you out of the way. Out
Yeah.
of the way, pops! I'm in
I
there.
bet you would have. I bet you would. I don't know. We would have to throw down. Colorization crowd sounds a lot like the Real Magic. Yeah. I don't know. I'm a little. I'm with. You know what? I'm with you, Steven. I have a hard time, but I will say I'm a hypocrite because I love the fact that they colorized "I Love Lucy" and I loved it. I thought it was just an absolute beautiful experience. I saw it in theater. They did like 5 episodes in color, and it was a beautiful experience. And they explained their passion as fans trying to do that, and they had
Mhm.
to change colors of what original. So they really went through it. So.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I seen the colorization, the early Doctor Who's,
mhm.
and I'm pro that. I want to see those in color because there was so much stuff that they had on it that like Hartnell said, he was disappointed that the Celestial Toy Maker was in black and white because of all the wonderful colors of the costumes and such like that.
Oh yeah, and
Uh,
set design would get lost too, right? Because I mean, the set design is sometimes so beautiful. Costuming and
mhm,
set design gets lost in black and white sometimes.
right.
For sure, for sure.
But my caveat for that is if you do it, you make sure you preserve the originals, the black and white originals,
The
because
best you
and you
can,
have those
because that
available.
was the issue with Lucy, because they said Lucy. So there are episodes of Lucy where she's actually wearing like a green dress, like, all these different weird colors, because that's how it would
Mhm,
play best in black and white. But you
right.
translate it to film, and it's like jarring because it doesn't work,
Mhm,
right? So there
yeah.
are issues with that.
Mhm,
I do worry because I think AI will make this more commonplace, and I do fear that we'll have all sorts of crazy stuff that people will see
yeah.
10, 20,
Mhm,
30 years. Anyway, way beyond me.
yeah.
Steve is also talking about Wizard of Oz, rediscovered for sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
agree.
yeah, that
Yeah,
definitely was. It
yeah,
was
lots of love.
lost. Yeah, it was lost for so long for people that to recognize the greatness of that film. And I don't know, when did it really start taking off again? I can't. Was it when they
I would
discovered they
double
can
check the
play?
timeline on that. I don't know if it went to TV first or they did a theatrical on it.
Yeah,
I think it was also too stuff was one and done. Right, we talk a
yeah,
lot about during the Christmas season. We talk about Rankin Bass and Christmas specials and whatever. If you weren't
mhm,
at home on that Thursday night at 8 p.m. and you missed it, you didn't miss it till a whole another year. Sorry, folks, we didn't have
or
VHS
ever.
yet. Yeah,
Yeah, or ever, because like I said, there's those BC animated that they did for
right.
Thanksgiving and for
Yep.
Christmas. Never seen again. I
No,
think they're on YouTube, but you never seen again. And that's the sad thing. There's so many gems out there.
that's true.
Um, which is why I can understand why some people do the sailing of the high seas, you might say, because you're not offering it to us, so I'm going to offer it to you.
Yeah, that's going to be a bigger and bigger thing, I think, over the next 50 to 100 years, too, because all this stuff
Mhm.
becomes public domain.
Right.
Tombstone, a cult movie. I would say I will call it. I think it
Mm,
has. I think it
mhm.
has gone beyond cult because
Yeah.
now it is among most people's best Western lists because it's so rewatchable and so
Yeah.
quotable. I don't.
Hmm.
I think if you say from when it was released in that first few years, you had the people that felt that way, then I would say yes, it could be cult during that window. But I think now it
Hmm.
falls in the same camp as Blade Runner and the Thing. What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think, Baron?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely part of this topic. It was kind of a little cult thing, and then boom, whatever it was that gave it that shot of life again. Now it's mainstream. I mean, just by the quote, I'm your Huckleberry, or
Hmm.
well, bye, and all the memes they
Hmm.
have for
Oh
those.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
and I think that's the thing. I think today, how you can tell if something's gone mainstream is the memes. If they're using it for a meme,
Yeah, once your memes, you've made it. You've made it.
right?
Okay, I don't.
It used to be if I was a Mad Magazine, I made it. Now it's
That's a
memes.
good point. That's a good reference for sure. Dark Crystal for sure would be. I think Dark
Yeah,
Crystal is still. I think Dark Crystal and Labyrinth would both still be considered cult movies today because even
yeah,
though they have massive followings, I don't think they're mainstream enough. The
no.
Witches, not sure. Hmm. Yeah.
I'm
Mike's
not
also.
familiar with the witches. There's so many
Yeah,
of them.
due to the movie celebrating milestone anniversary, the other reason people like the other two. Yeah, I know. I understand now. You're explaining your yeah. Let's
He's
see.
good at that.
And yeah, remember celebrated for sure, for sure. Nick
Yeah.
Weiser in the house. Hey, brother.
Wow.
When are movies no longer cult? Hmm. Yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah.
It's it is a fun topic, Nick. I love to hear your thoughts sometime. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is one of those things that kind of occurred to me. Like Office Space was in. I don't know. See, I think it really is what Baron just said. It was cult until
Mhm.
all the stuff started showing up in all the stores. Whenever you can go and buy
Mhm.
Office Space stuff in mass at FYE in a mall,
Mhm.
you're not cult anymore. You've become big, and that's where it happens. Once you've become memed, Office Space
Mhm.
is no longer
Well, I
cult
think the
anymore.
thing with I think the thing with Office Space is it became relatable, especially to the cube rats. I mean, for me, the similar experiences Dilbert the daily cartoon strips back in the 80s. I would always overgo, it's like, yeah, what is this crap, right? Until somebody remember the old days of the meme when you clip something out and you white it out or you scratched out and you put
Hmm.
names and all that and hung on the board. Those were the old memes days. Somebody did that with a bunch of people that was in the company I was working, and it hit right there. It's like, okay, I
Gotcha.
got it. And I love Dilbert. I think when people started looking at Office Space and started going, yeah, that guy that talks like that is just like my boss. He
Hmm.
wants me to come in on Saturday. Or, even, you took my swing line. I want my swing line. You started seeing people in your workplace.
Where's
Like
my landscape?
WKRP in Cincinnati. When I was in radio and I, was working the radio stations, like, yeah, that's Herb. That's Carlson. That's Herb. I was trying to be Johnny. You know, uh,
Yeah.
and
The Bobs was a big thing for me, and the copy machine, smashing the copy fax machine and stuff for sure.
oh, amen, amen. Who didn't want
Yeah.
to do that? Yeah, the Bobs.
Yeah.
What exactly is it you do here?
What is it you do? Nick, this is the challenge of being a critic at all is how you can size things up, right? Because you could have two movies that are great and you may even score them the same, but they're not apples to apples. And that's where genres come in, and that's where time frames and perspective come in and things like that. So it is definitely one of the big challenges I think of being offering commentary or being a critic and that kind of thing.
Mhm,
People will always try to catch you. It's like, what's your favorite
mhm.
movie of all time? That is a completely unfair thing to do because each
Yeah.
genre, there's so many nuances for sure. So,
Yeah,
And this
same thing
is
with books.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. And there's so many elements of what makes things work in media box office success, like we discussed earlier, for sure. Which one gets paid homage more? Lines that could be cited to a normie knows. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's when it kind of becomes no. It may not be cult anymore. When I don't think Lion King was ever really cult per se, but
No.
I think it's become a phenomenon. Whereas something like Boondock Saints, yeah, I would still think Boondock Saints. It's the same. It's just I would feel it's the same group with like Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. They're like
Yeah.
they have massive fandoms and people who love them, but I don't think they've transcended into something bigger.
Right.
Yeah, I mean
Hmm.
I get it, but not everybody does for sure. So
Well,
uh, he is going back with Nick here about the memeing thing, which is totally in line with what you said a minute ago, and I really do agree with that for sure.
mhm.
This was so Nick's saying that Tombstone's not just a classic. See, I think that's the thing, Nick. You probably loved it right out of the get go, and I think that when we fast forward 20 something years, I think people just love it. It just become big. I think at some point, like that's what happened with Blade Runner. It's what happened with Thing. It's what happened with some of these. They were so good that
Mhm.
even like a mainstream, it couldn't ignore the fact that it's just that big for sure.
Well,
So
you were talking before about how you were being controversial with uh, Nightmare Before Christmas. I'm going to be controversial here with this statement. Citizen Kane was a cult film with
for its time, it was.
Randolph Hearst.
Mhm,
Yeah, with
mhm.
Hearst trying to keep it out of all the theaters. It wasn't really discovered until later on.
Right.
Even though they did see the genius of Orson Welles, gave him the wonderful Ambersons, which failed because he wasn't in it. They're expecting to see him in there, but it took a while for people to grab onto it. Now, not so much again because of that quote unquote black and white thing.
Mhm.
But I mean, how it exploded definitely in the 70s when you had the filmmakers citing it as the top tier, the creme de la creme of
Mhm.
films. So, and that's just it. It's you
I don't know how
can't
long
go
it takes, but I
bypassing.
couldn't agree more. Like, Psycho kind of fits the same category, right? Because
Oh
Psycho
yeah.
was like panned by critics and whatever,
Mhm.
but I mean, when you go out 10, 15 years, people are like, no, this is a ground changing movie, yeah, stuff like that. So that's definitely a part of it. What do you think about like Big Lebowski? Is it still cultish?
Oh, I
'Cause I think
I
it's at
think
the
it's on the
edge. I think it's at the
yeah
edge
borderline.
of it's higher than the Dark Crystal Labyrinth type stuff. I I
Hmm.
think it's probably similar to Tombstone,
Hmm.
but not as marketed. It's in that same group with Tombstone. They're not as sort of
Right.
like they're not merged enough yet. They're right at the point of becoming that phenomenon. I don't think
Right.
I'd really consider it cult anymore, but it's still got a lot of cult feel to it, way more than Tombstone does. But it's in that same category of popularity. So
I
yeah, I don't know.
wouldn't put it. I wouldn't put it quite in mainstream just yet because this is Coen Brothers. It's either going to be a big hit or it's going to be a cult film. Eraserhead, anybody?
Mhm.
But I think it's been memed. It's been quoted, so it's there. Normies do understand it, but I don't think it's been. And I think a lot of the fans of the Big Lebowski like it that way because they don't want, as we say, like normies coming in and ruining it all. As I like to call them, the trendies. Oh, this is the latest trend. Let's go in there and ruin it, and then move on to the next thing, like a swarm of locusts. It still has that little tight community that loves and adores that film. Uh, Mike doesn't think so. I can see where he comes on that. I think it is on that borderline, though. I think it's recognized enough by people out there. I say give it another year or so,
I
especially
think
if you're going
we're
to
in the
go.
middle of it. I think because I
Yeah,
have a T-shirt with the dude on it. I've seen
hmm,
stickers. I
yeah.
think we're in the
Everybody
middle of
knows.
seeing how mainstream Big Lebowski is. I don't know how
Hmm.
accessible it is for people to watch other than on a streaming service.
Hmm.
So I feel like it's
Yeah.
right in that phase. It's a little bit of
Hmm.
a slower burn because of accessibility. But
Right.
I think if this was happening in a VHS and cable boom and Big
Hmm.
Lebowski was out there, it'd be something people were talking about like
Oh,
crazy. But
yeah.
one that hasn't moved yet, I wanted to ask you, is probably Donnie Darko, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
Donnie Darko probably is still deep in cult, and
You
it's
better
like a
watch.
word of mouth only kind of thing.
I think it's because it's such a bizarre, dark, weird
Weird.
film. Yeah, I mean, it's a horror film, but it's a horror film in a And what is this all about? Which is great. We need films like that. We need to have a film that is in that cult standing, um, where people do understand it. Some people love it and they don't understand it. They just love the film. Um, I don't know if they'll ever gain a mainstream, but it's been quoted, Donnie Darko. I mean, it's been memed a little, but I think it's a niche meme group, a niche area that it gets referenced to. And yeah, I don't think it ever will be considered mainstream. It's just either too far ahead of its time or it's just too bizarre, too
Yeah, I
weird.
think it's similar to like a Racerhead or something. They're never
Yeah.
going to climb out of their obscure cultish sort of box of. I just
Mhm.
think that's just the nature of their film. They're too much. This is another one. Toxic Avenger is the same thing. For people that love Toxic
Yeah.
Avenger, it would be in that same. It's just too odd. The fact that they're even talking about doing another film, it's just odd. I just don't know. I
Yeah.
just don't know how it can transcend into something big.
Well,
I don't know. It's just not that kind of film that lends itself to more mainstream and yeah.
Well,
I don't know. We'll
it
see.
did have its moment. It did have its day in the sun
Sure.
because it was such a bizarre one. Trauma Films doing that. I mean, off
Yep.
of that, you had the three sequels. You had the animated series, which I think is
Yep.
what helped destroy it. If they wouldn't have done that, I think Toxic Avenger probably would have even gone more because they had to tame it back. The big thing about Toxic Avenger was going gonzo and then dialing it up even more. Right. The thing
Mm.
I laugh most about this reboot, you know who's going to be playing Toxie.
Oh, it was Peter Dinklage, right?
Yep.
Or is
Ding,
he?
ding, ding, ding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's going to be.
Ugh.
It's like, how are they going to do that? Toxic Avengers is big, But okay, you got me intrigued. Elijah Wood and a
Mm.
few others in there. It got me intrigued in there. I love the first Toxie, um, just because again it's Gonzo. But
Yeah. It's definitely interesting to think about for sure. Nick's pointing out that it's about the recognizability of it. If it's an average norm, you can point it out. It's not really most would recognize Donnie Darko book. I think that's really kind of the crux to how things transcend out of their cultish
yeah,
background or nature, or out of, let's say, like you were pointing out things that you didn't feel like were cult Nick because they were successful, or you recognized right out of the gate they were
hmm
successful or they were really, really good. But I think there's sort of like that transition into normie,
yeah.
that kind of thing for sure. So yeah,
Well, I
Toxic
mean, I've
Avenger
seen
action figures for sure.
Yeah. I've seen T-shirts with the rabbit on it. So I mean, there is merch out there. But then again, eh, I think you're kind of hitting that niche of the goth emu type crowd that
Hmm.
really clamor towards it. And the hardcore ones. So I wouldn't wear one,
Yeah.
but that's me. I mean, no
Right.
offense or whatever to it. Just that's not my thing. Kind of
Yeah, and
cool.
when you're in those fandoms, sometimes you don't realize that you're in like the cult of the fandom sometimes, but that's fine. Memes and merch juxtaposed. Yeah, I totally agree.
Mhm.
And some stuff like that. Yeah, you're bringing up Monroe, Hepburn, Dean, Bruce Lee, Brandon Lee for sure, for sure.
You
So,
know, and
uh,
and that's also the one thing. And I know it sounds heartless, it sounds cruel, but sometimes some of these people's careers, it's their death that really shoots them into godhood. James Dean, I mean, what his last two, he had three films. The last two came out after he died. It's his mystique again, that legend of him that shot him up to this level of godhood of in the movie industry. I think, but yeah, it's just how some of them go. The tragedy. I mean, Brandon Lee, his passing, the tragedy behind it. Again, it becomes part of that mythology, folklore of Hollywood. Marilyn Monroe, the same thing. So,
true, very true. Yeah, I think Heath Ledger will be.
oh
I think he'll be reborn again through even more of that at some point. I think there'll be
yeah,
another round of that, for sure. So,
he
yeah,
was
man, it's
excellent.
good.
In The
It's good.
Patriot. That's my first experience of him, and I thought this guy's good. So, yeah.
Yeah, I could see, yeah, some different roles, but yeah,
Mhm.
we'll see. So, but it's been
Yeah,
fun, man. I tell you, it's been a good chance to run through, at least conceptually, that there is this evolution of things that can have cult followings that kind of evolve and they eventually kind of get pushed into the mainstream and normie, even if it's just from the critical standpoints, like a thing
right.
would be. But
Mhm.
now there is thing merch, there is things t-shirts, there is thing stuff. So there's stuff that's even as fringy as that, like Toxic Avenger,
Mhm.
maybe it can continue
Yeah.
to evolve and find itself into normie and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, I
but
mean,
Nick, yeah, no, thanks, man. We appreciate that. It was a fun one to do. It was a fun one to throw
yeah,
out there. I'm glad Baron was able to join me. He before the show, he kind of teased one. So I want to wait and make sure I watch it before I tease. So he threw a one I had not seen, and I'm like, I need to have Baron back for my first watch experience of this one. So I don't want to spoil that one yet because I got to make sure I get it done first. But yeah, he'll come back and we'll talk about some more kind of things because we're contemporaries, man. It's kind of cool
yeah.
to hang with someone who can relate to the life experience of, when you see certain things in theaters and VHS and cable and
Mhm.
whatever. So yeah, brother, it's always great to have you,
Yeah.
man.
The only thing I'm upset about this is we've hardly even touched the surface of it. We could go on
Oh
for
yeah.
hours and hours. I mean, but other
Hmm.
than that, yeah, it's a ton of fun. It's like it's like I haven't even brought up Highlander yet. I haven't brought this one up, but there's just so much out there, and that's just it. And what we can talk about with that's circling around, and hopefully educate some people who aren't
Hmm.
don't know about it, or understand what we went through back in the day, the glory days, the good days.
Yeah, I feel like it's just an opportunity to share. That's one of the things I've enjoyed most about doing the YouTube thing too, is
Mhm,
doing things that can maybe open someone's eyes, something good they've never seen before, or how things worked
mhm.
culturally 30, 40, 50 years ago, how
Yeah.
certain movies have evolved over time. That's some of the fun
Mhm.
stuff to do this. Yeah, for sure. So, brother, I know you're on with Mike and Pacific 414 regularly, but go ahead and plug like
Yeah.
the timetable, the schedule, where you're going to be, stuff that you're doing over on your channel, things like that.
Okay. Well, anybody who doesn't know, of course, I'm with Pop Talk with Pacific 414 on that channel. And he has twice a week, we have Pop Talk Sundays at noon Central Standard Time, 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Then on Wednesdays at 5 o'clock Central Standard Time and 6 Eastern time. I have to make sure I got the times all right. I go back. I'm a little dyslexic. And usually on the Wednesday one, we do have that Rumble hour. That's a Rumble exclusive, the last hour, which is a lie. It usually goes longer than that because we have a little bit more freedom to say some of the stuff that we want to say. And we figure that YouTube might say, "Nah, you can't talk about that." So we have that there on Thursdays. I am with Jace Fox on 540 Studio, and this the Beyond, and that's with, of course, Chase Fox, Prismatics, my contemporary, the Cash Monet double oh
Mhm.
007, myself, just a whole slew of people there. That's at anywhere between 6 and 6:30 Central Standard Time. I opened up my Discord. And I saw that. I should have been paying attention. I guess there was a show yesterday. We're on a little bit of a hiatus, and it's like, oh, we have a show. I wasn't paying attention, so I missed yesterday's show. I got to apologize. Send money his way. Gotta get that guilt in there because he's that Norwegian. But yeah, anywhere between 6 and 6:30 Central Standard Time because he's Norwegian is the start. So please join us there. On Fridays, not this Friday, not today, but next Friday on Cash Monet's channel, Phantom Hooligans, or as we like to say, Booligans. We do our Friday night. Basically, it's Friday Night Hooligans. We play. Basically pick a game. We play. Usually, we have a fourth come in and help us, or if there's more people that can come in on these co-ops, we try to get as many as possible.
Awesome.
That's on, of course, the Phantom Hooligans channel, and that is on Fridays, 8:30 Central Standard Time, 6:30 Pacific, because that's where he lives. Oh, I got a lot of stuff. I'm trying to make more of a presence on Raymond Feliciano's King Dolphin TV. His Just Cause, that's on Fridays. I believe it's 4 o'clock Central Standard Time. So that's Dolphin TV. Boy, my schedule's getting busy. And then on Tuesdays, it's Cash Money and I on a Rumble only series. Again, that freedom thing, we call it, of course, cranky old fans. We take two topics and we talk about it. It can be anything across the spectrum. And like, just little topics about, anime, what's with animation, why is it faltering, stuff like that. It's kind of a precursor to a series that we're working on called The War Room, where we want to bring more people in on a panel like this, on a panel, and give them a chance to talk as well. So again, that's at I believe that's at 10 o'clock Central Standard Time, 8 o'clock Pacific. That's on the Rumble channel. uh, fa- uh, fa- uh, Cash Money Madness. Cash Money Madness. Yeah, there we
Awesome.
go.
Awesome.
And I
He's a
think,
busy
yeah,
man. He's a
I
busy
have to
man.
be.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's like all of a sudden my calendar is getting full, and I love it. And if anybody wants me on their stuff, I'm more than happy to. I'm kind of egomaniac that way.
All right. Well, it's good, man. It's great to have you, man. It's been good. So,
Well,
but
thank
now
you so
next week we'll
much.
talk into start transitioning into some other fun sort of topics. Stone Loki will be in the house next week. We'll be talking about Alien versus Aliens. We'll kind of have a little bit of a conversation back and forth about some of its key elements and comparing the two and sort of the busting through the apples and oranges comparison of two films that don't initially align with their genres, but definitely come up in conversation a lot. So I got to bring in an alien xenomorph guru for that. So we'll be doing that next week. But great to have Baron here. Great to have all you in chat, man. You guys are amazing. Thank you for making this worthwhile doing. Hopefully it makes your Friday a little bit brighter and more fun. If you're catching us on the rewatch, feel free to hit us up with your comments and thoughts. I know there's tons of movies that we could bring up. We could, like Barron's, we could probably do in 8 hours and we wouldn't even still get done, because it's just like when you grow up in a VHS and cable era, there's so many things that can be brought to the table of conversation. But man, it's all the more reason to keep doing it. Just keep going.
I was just ramping up. Can you imagine if we kept on going on this? I'm sure you were just ramping up. It's like, this is you gain speed. Oh, we got to end. It's like, but you know what? I think we hit a lot of good stuff there.
It's just another reason to keep doing more shows like this, just more conversations for sure. So, well, folks, be blessed, talk hard. I'll see you guys soon. Take care, everybody. I am Pops.
Love you all.